The last thing that killed me was an air tank that exploded like an angry metal whale. The next thing I saw was a gray stone flying straight into the transparent bubble above my new hand. The stone struck the bubble. Pop. 300 students in the stone amphitheater went silent for one breath. Then they laughed so hard that one boy dropped his wand. I stared at my hand. It was younger than the one I remembered. There were no burn scars on it. A black academy sleeve covered my arm, and a silver badge on my chest carried a name. Nolan. That was useful. I had been alive in this world for perhaps 4 seconds, and I already knew 2 things. My name was Nolan, and my magic had the combat value of soap. The man who had thrown the stone brushed dust from his red teacher's coat. His narrow face showed relief, not surprise. "One ordinary pebble," he said. "No reinforcement, no elemental reaction, no useful pressure. Nolan has awakened a hollow air bubble." The crystal board above the arena changed. My name fell from 187th place to 300th. Last. The laughter doubled. "Teacher Merrick," a girl called from the first row. "The exam rules say every awakened construct must be tested against magic before physical force." I found her at once. She had dark hair tied behind her head, clear gray eyes, and ink on 3 fingers. She was not laughing. Merrick did not look at her. "A construct that cannot survive a stone does not deserve expensive testing crystals." That answer told me more than his coat, his badge, and the careful smiles of the students beside him. He had expected my bubble to fail. He had wanted it to fail quickly. A tall boy in a white uniform leaned against the front rail. Gold thread covered his cuffs. A small flame floated over his palm, shaped like a bird. "Do not be cruel, Leah," he said. "Perhaps Nolan can entertain children at birthday feasts." The flame bird flapped its wings. A second bubble appeared over my palm without my permission. The bird turned toward it. Merrick saw the movement. He picked up another stone. I closed my fingers. The bubble vanished before he could throw. "Control is poor as well," he said. The crystal board rang like a bell. A cold voice announced that Dax remained first with an awakening score of 96. It then announced that Nolan had received 0. The crowd cheered for Dax. He bowed as if he had personally invented fire. I did not argue. In my old life, arguing with a damaged pressure gauge had never repaired it. I needed facts first. Fragments of memory settled into my head while the next student entered the arena. I was 16. I had no family in this city. The academy paid for my bed and meals only while I stayed above the lowest 10 places. Merrick's 0 had not merely embarrassed me. It had removed my room, my food allowance, and my right to attend combat lessons. The injustice was efficient. I almost respected the design. Almost. At sunset, the residence keeper placed my blanket outside the dormitory. 30 students watched from the windows. Someone blew a soap bubble down at me. It struck my hair and burst. "A relative!" someone shouted. More laughter followed. Leah came through the courtyard carrying a wooden case. She stopped beside my blanket. "Merrick broke the rules," she said. I noticed. "You are very calm." The last container that exploded near me removed a wall and most of my afternoon. A soap bubble ranks low on my list of emergencies. She studied me for a moment. "You were different this morning." "This morning I had a stone approaching my face." That was true enough. Leah opened her case. Inside were copper wires, small crystals, a measuring dial, and 2 dry rolls of bread. "The old storage laboratory is unused at night," she said. "I can test your bubble properly. If it is useless, I will give you 1 roll and leave. If it is not useless, you can have both." That is the best research grant I have received today. We walked across the dark academy grounds. I carried my blanket. She carried the equipment. Behind us, the ranking board still showed my name at the bottom in letters large enough for the moon to read. The storage laboratory smelled of copper, dust, and old smoke. Leah lit 1 lamp and locked the door. I placed my blanket beside a cold furnace. Midnight arrived while she connected a blue measuring crystal to a brass stand. At that exact moment, a voice spoke inside my head. It was calm and without emotion. It said, my awakening had been judged under an invalid test. A hidden path had therefore opened. The first class was Element Catcher. Its later stages were Spherical Knight and Lord of Domes. The voice gave me one rule. Any foreign magic that crossed the surface of my bubble could be held inside it. That was all. No sword skill, no endless mana, no ancient dragon hiding in my elbow. One bubble, one broken rule. In this world, a spell belonged to its caster until it faded or struck a target. My bubble could interrupt that law. It could take magic without learning or owning the spell. I smiled. Leah took one step back. Why do you look pleased? Because Merrick tested a bucket by hitting it with a brick. I raised my hand. A clear sphere appeared above my palm. It was the size of an apple. I felt one small piece of strength leave me. Leah checked the measuring crystal. You spent exactly 1 unit of mana. Your total reserve is 20 units. Send 1 unit of fire into it. It will burst. Then we lose 1 bubble. We still have 2 bread rolls. She touched a copper rod and formed a spark. The spark drifted into the sphere. It did not pass through. Orange light swirled inside the clear shell. The bubble became a tiny glass sun. Leah forgot to breathe. The measuring needle stopped at 1. Again, I said. She added a second spark, then a third, then a fourth. The bubble held them all. 4 units of fire rotated inside a shell that had cost me 1 unit of mana. Leah grabbed my wrist and pulled it closer to the dial. That is impossible. That word usually means the experiment should be repeated. Her eyes shone. She formed a 5th spark. Wait, I said. The spark had already crossed the surface. The sphere burst. Leah ducked behind the wooden case. I covered my face. Hot orange fragments filled the room, but they did not strike us. They stopped in the air. 5 pieces floated over the table. Each looked like a curved shard of glowing glass. I could feel them. I moved 1 finger. The shards turned. Leah slowly raised her head. A normal failed construct releases its energy. Mine has not read the textbook. I pointed at the cold furnace. The 5 shards flew into it, one after another. Flame roared under the iron plate. The laboratory warmed in seconds. The measuring crystal showed 5 units of fire still under my control. That was the first hidden consequence. An overloaded bubble broke, but its charged pieces remained mine to move. The shell was weak. Breaking it only changed its shape. My reserve held 19 units of mana. I had spent 1 and captured 5. The exchange was excellent. The danger was also excellent. If my attention slipped, 5 burning blades would be loose in a room made mostly of old wood. Leah stepped out from behind the case. Her cheeks were pink from the heat. "Do it again," she whispered. We worked for 3 hours. The second sphere held 4 units safely. The third burst at 5. Ice behaved the same way. A light spell behaved the same way. My bubbles ignored Leah's finger when she poked them and burst when she used the end of a spoon. 1 spoon cost us 6 minutes of cleaning. By the end, we had facts. Each small sphere cost 1 unit of my mana. Each held 4 units of foreign energy without danger. At 5, it burst. I could guide the filled shell or its broken pieces within 20 paces. Physical objects crossed nothing. They simply destroyed it. I could not create power. I could only catch power that someone else had already paid for. My hands began to shake after controlling 12 fragments at once. At 16, my vision blurred. At 20, blood ran from my nose. I stopped. "Your limit is lower than your ambition," Leah said. She pressed a cloth under my nose. "That is common in young men," I said. She laughed once, then looked surprised that she had done it. We ate the bread beside the warm furnace. It was dry enough to repair a road, but Leah found a jar of plum jam in the back of a cabinet. The jam was sharp and sweet. Melted butter remained in another jar. We spread it over the bread and held each piece above the captured fire until the edges turned crisp. No feast in either of my lives had tasted better. Leah looked at the orange shards circling the furnace. Merrick must see this. He already decided what he saw. The Academy Review Code gives him 1 chance to correct an invalid score before the board receives a formal complaint. How many witnesses can attend? She smiled. As many as fit in the lower practice hall. At dawn, Leah posted the experiment results on the public notice board. She signed her name and added a challenge to Merrick's score. Students gathered before breakfast. By the time Merrick arrived, 42 people were waiting outside the practice hall. Dax came too. His white coat looked fresh enough to have never met weather. Merrick read Leah's report. His face tightened when he reached the ratio of 1 unit to 4. "A faulty crystal," he said, "and an exhausted researcher." "The crystal was calibrated yesterday," Leah replied. "Then Nolan used a trick." I stood inside the marked circle with 5 empty spheres floating around me. They had cost 5 units of mana. My reserve had recovered to 17 after food and rest. "Show me the trick," I said. Merrick had a simple choice. He could repeat the proper test and admit his mistake, or refuse in front of the students and confirm Leah's complaint. He chose a third option. Angry people often invented those. "A real opponent will not feed him sparks," he said. "I will use a training flare of 20 units. If his bubbles fail, Leah loses laboratory access for wasting faculty time." The room went quiet. Now his motive was visible. This was not about my score. It was about control. If unusual results could challenge a teacher's judgment, students might begin asking other questions. Leah went pale, but she did not withdraw her signature. "Agreed," I said. Merrick lifted his wand. A red ball of flame grew above it. The hall's measuring pillars marked 5 units, then 10, then 15. Dax folded his arms. "Try not to burn the floor. Nolan may need it as a bed." The pillars reached 20. Merrick fired. I moved my 5 bubbles into a line. The flare entered the first sphere. 4 units stayed inside. The remaining fire crossed into the second, then the third, then the fourth, then the fifth. 5 clear spheres hung in front of my face. Each held exactly 4 units of Merrick's flame. Nothing reached me. Nobody laughed. I separated the spheres and sent them toward the 20 practice lamps along the wall. I opened a tiny hole in each shell. 1 unit of fire left at a time. The lamps ignited from left to right. 1, 2, 10, 20. The final lamp blazed above Merrick's head. The hall erupted. Students climbed onto benches. Someone shouted that the last ranked student had caught a teacher's spell. Someone else ran outside to update the betting slate. Dax's flame bird vanished from his palm. Merrick raised his wand again. "The test is complete," Leah said loudly. "A second attack would be assault." 42 witnesses turned toward him. Merrick lowered the wand. The ranking board rang across the academy. It announced that Nolan's awakening score had been corrected from 0 to 40. My position rose from 300th to 240th. The sound carried through every courtyard. Merrick stood beneath 20 lamps lit by his own spell. His face was the same color as his coat. The review clerk arrived before he could leave. She paid me 30 silver coins for the invalid loss of housing, restored my meal allowance, and issued a bronze laboratory pass. Leah kept her access. Strength, resources, status. All 3 had moved before breakfast. Not far enough, but in the correct direction. When we left the hall, students opened a path for us. Some stared at the bubbles, some stared at me. The same boy who had dropped his wand during the exam asked if I could catch lightning. "Bring me lightning and we can find out," I said. He decided he had another appointment. That evening, Leah took me to a small kitchen behind the research wing. Mavis, the cook, served thick beef soup in clay bowls. The broth carried black pepper, onion, and roasted garlic. Soft carrots broke under the spoon. Pieces of beef had cooked long enough to fall apart without effort. Fresh bread came from the oven with a hard golden crust. Butter disappeared into it at once. I paid 2 silver for both meals. Spending my first money hurt less than expected. Leah dipped bread into the broth. "You had 30 silver for less than a day and already spent 2. I invested in keeping the only honest witness alive." "And yourself?" "Secondary benefit." She smiled into her bowl. Outside, my corrected rank glowed on the tower board. 240th was not impressive. It was merely 60 places above the bottom. But students stopped at the board, pointed at my name, and told the story again. Each version made Merrick's spell larger. By the 6th version, I had caught a dragon. I slept in a narrow restored room with my blanket, my laboratory pass, and 28 silver under the pillow. Before closing my eyes, I created one empty bubble above the bed. It did not float toward the ceiling. It leaned east. I moved it back. It leaned east again, pulled by something beyond the wall. Then the enormous protective dome above the academy gave a low, distant hum. My little bubble answered. For 1 second, I felt the curve of something vast surrounding not only the academy, but every street, tower, and sleeping person in the city. Then something touched that vast curve from the other side. The sunrise had a direction, and every empty bubble I made pointed toward it like a frightened eye. When the academy bells rang, the spheres snapped back to normal, as if nothing strange had happened. I did not enjoy mysteries that followed a schedule. Leah arrived at my door with 2 measuring rods and a paper bag that smelled of cinnamon. I showed her the leaning bubble before telling her about the touch from outside. She placed 1 rod against the wall and raised the other toward the academy dome. The needles did not move. "No local spell," she said. "No wind pressure, no magnetic pull." "Then the good news is that our instruments agree with our ignorance." She handed me the bag. Inside were 4 warm buns filled with apple and brown sugar. The soft dough steamed when I tore one open. We ate 2 while watching an empty sphere behave perfectly. "We need access to the main dome records," Leah said. "What rank grants that?" "The top 10. I looked through the window. The tower board displayed my name in 240th place. "Then the mystery can wait for breakfast to settle." The academy had not forgotten the previous morning. Students followed me from the residence hall to the research wing. They asked me to catch candle flames, cleaning charms, and one very small curse that made shoes squeak. I refused the curse. My life had improved, but not enough to store magic from a boy who smelled like boiled socks. The public board had collected 7 new notices about me. 3 called my class a fraud. 2 offered money for a demonstration. 1 offered marriage. The final notice asked whether a bubble full of soup would remain hot. That question had economic value. Mavis was feeding wood into the kitchen furnace when Leah and I arrived. A red fire crystal sat beneath the iron stove. It produced steady heat, but a crack ran through its center. "A replacement costs 6 silver, Mavis said. "The Dax family raised the price again. They control every licensed fire crystal in the district." Above the stove, hot air and weak magical flame escaped through a copper vent. Most of that energy vanished into the chimney. I held up a bubble. "How much heat does your kitchen lose each morning?" Mavis narrowed her eyes. "Enough to cook breakfast for 30 hungry students." "I can sell it back to you." She looked at Leah. "Did the bubble boy hit his head?" "A stone almost did," Leah said. "The rest is natural." We attached a wide funnel to the furnace vent. The first sphere floated inside it and caught 4 units of waste flame. I sealed the bubble and guided it beneath a pot of cold water. A narrow opening released the stored heat. The water began to steam. Mavis stopped feeding wood into the furnace. We filled a second sphere, then a third. Each cost me 1 unit of mana and stored 4 units that the chimney would have swallowed. 12 spheres held 48 units of heat. Mavis used them to bake 60 loaves without touching the damaged crystal. The scent rolled through the research wing. Students appeared as if summoned by bread magic. Mavis paid me 12 silver, 1 for each sphere. That was twice the cost of 1 new fire crystal, but the spheres replaced fuel, reduced smoke, and could be moved between stoves. She estimated that 12 each morning would save her 18 silver every week. I estimated that selling heat to 3 kitchens could earn me more than 1 gold each month. My useless bubble had found a job before half the students did. By noon, a line formed outside the kitchen. The metal workshop wanted captured furnace heat. The bathhouse wanted 4 spheres each evening. An alchemist offered 5 silver for a sphere filled with stable cold. I had only 20 units of mana and could not fill every order. My reserve recovered 1 unit every quarter hour while I rested. Creating too quickly made my fingers numb. Filled spheres also demanded a thread of attention. At 20, I could feel each one tugging at my thoughts like a child pulling a sleeve, so I wrote down prices. Heat cost 1 silver per sphere. Cold cost 2. Dangerous spells required a private agreement and a witness. Leah read the page. You created a market in one morning. No, the market existed. Everyone was throwing the product up a chimney. The crowd outside carried the news faster than any messenger. By lunch, the public board called me the walking stove. My rank did not change, but my reputation did. Students who had laughed now offered to carry my equipment. I accepted help from a quiet boy named Rel and paid him 1 copper. 10 other volunteers appeared at once. That was when the white carriage stopped outside the kitchen. A man in a gray business coat stepped down. A small flame bird was stitched over his pocket. 2 academy guards followed him. Unlicensed elemental storage, he announced. All filled spheres are subject to seizure under the Dax family heat charter. Mavis came out holding a bread paddle like a weapon. The charter covers fire crystals, she said. Not air. The spheres contain fire. Then seize my oven too. It contains bread, and your family sells grain. Students laughed. The clerk's ears turned red. He reached for the nearest filled bubble. I moved it above his hand. 4 units of fire, I said. The shell breaks under physical contact. If you seize it incorrectly, your sleeve will become educational. He withdrew his hand. Applause came from the courtyard. Dax walked through the crowd. He wore another white coat, this one trimmed with red gems. His smile was calm, but the flame bird over his shoulder was twice the size it had been at the exam. My clerk came to protect public safety, he said. You are selling unstable constructs beside a kitchen. Your family sells cracked crystals under a pot of boiling soup. Mavis raised the damaged crystal. The crack was visible from the courtyard. More students laughed. Dax's smile thinned. His motive was not difficult to understand. He was the Academy's first ranked fire student because his family supplied the Academy's heat. Every teacher knew their name. Every kitchen used their crystals. If the last ranked orphan could replace part of that business with floating air, Dax did not merely lose silver. He lost the reason people bowed before he entered a room. You caught one training flare, he said. Now you pretend to be an elemental master. I pretend to sell heat. Mavis has the receipts. Then prove your product is safe. He turned toward the lower practice court. More than 100 students already filled its steps. The Academy measuring pillars lit when he entered the circle. Stand against 1 attack, Dax said. If your spheres hold, my clerk leaves the kitchen. If they fail, you stop selling captured fire. The terms favored him. He could choose any strength. He had studied yesterday's demonstration. He knew a small sphere held 4 units and broke at 5. He also knew physical force destroyed the shell. Leah touched my arm. He is carrying a silver dueling coin. I saw it between his fingers. Good, I said. I had expected a response from the Dax family after the first sale. Before leaving the kitchen, I had created 16 empty bubbles. They floated in a loose cloud behind me. That had cost 16 of my 20 recovered units. Dax looked at them and laughed. More soap does not make armor. The crowd repeated the line. It was simple enough to travel. I stepped into the circle. 1 attack, I said. No limit? No limit. The measuring pillars recorded our agreement. A bright line closed around the court. Students stood on benches. Merrick appeared at the rear door, still wearing his red coat. He whispered something to Dax's clerk. Dax tossed the silver coin. It struck the front bubble and passed through with a soft pop. The crowd gasped, then laughed. 15 spheres remained. Dax spread both hands. His flame bird opened its wings and collapsed into a spinning ball. The measuring pillars climbed past 20 units, then 30, then 40. Leah gripped the rail. The heat pushed students back from the first row. Dax kept feeding mana into the spell. His face tightened. The pillars reached 60 units. He had used almost his full reserve on 1 attack. Catch this, he said. The fireball came at me like a furnace rolling downhill. I did not place the bubbles in a line. I spun them. 15 clear spheres formed a spiral in front of me. The first crossed the edge of the fireball and scooped away 4 units. I moved it aside and sent the second through. Then the third. Each sphere took 4 units and left the rest moving forward. The attack shrank in layers. 40 units remained. 32, 20, 8, 4. The final tongue of fire entered the 15th bubble less than an arm's length from my chest. The roar stopped. 15 glowing spheres hung around me. Each held exactly 4 units of Dax's magic. The court became silent enough to hear the damaged kitchen crystal crack again. Dax stared at his empty hands. "You said one bubble could hold 4, he said. "You brought 60. I brought 15. Someone in the stands began counting. The whole court joined by the 5th number. 15 bubbles, 60 captured units, 0 fire on my coat. The Academy board rang. My defensive score jumped from 40 to 68. Dax had expected a weak shell. He had not expected many weak shells to cooperate. That was the second consequence of my one rule. A large spell did not need a large container. I could divide it into exact pieces. My head throbbed. Controlling 15 full spheres was like balancing 15 hot bowls on a moving cart. If one broke near the crowd, the victory would become a funeral. I moved them away from the stands. Dax recovered enough to raise his chin. "You can hold the spell. You cannot use fire. Return it and prove otherwise." "That sounds unsafe." "Afraid?" He needed me to attack him. Then he could call the spheres unstable and make himself the victim. So I did not attack him. I arranged the 15 bubbles in a ring around the practice circle. I turned each opening upward and released one narrow jet. 15 columns of flame rose into the air. They curved inward over Dax and formed a bright cage. The heat never touched his skin. It did touch the many metal ornaments on his coat. Every red gem became hot. Dax's calm expression disappeared. He tried to remove the coat. The heated clasps stuck. He turned in a circle, pulling at the collar while 15 flames followed him. His white coat filled with hot air and swelled around his body. He looked like an expensive tent trying to escape a storm. The crowd broke. Students shouted, laughed, and pointed. Even one Academy guard covered his mouth. Mavis struck her bread paddle against the rail and called for him to flap his wings. Dax finally tore the coat open. A line of hidden cooling charms fell onto the sand. Personal protective charms were forbidden during a public test. The measuring pillars flashed red. His score dropped. I closed the bubbles before the flames could spread. Then I guided all 15 spheres to the stone target wall. Their stored fire left in controlled bursts. 15 black circles appeared in a perfect line. The crowd counted those too. The Academy board rang a second time. My rank rose from 240th to 119th. Dax remained first, but his illegal equipment cost him 12 points. Merrick slipped away before anyone could ask why he had not inspected Dax's coat. The clerk tore up the seizure order in front of the kitchen. Mavis made him place every piece in the waste bin while students watched. The Academy paid me 1 gold and 10 silver for demonstrating a new defensive method. Leah made the clerk record that the payment was public and unconditional. Together with my kitchen earnings and the 28 silver I had kept, I owned 1 gold and 50 silver. 1 gold equaled 100 silver. Yesterday I had slept beside a furnace for the promise of bread. Today I could pay for a small room for several months. My strength had changed too. Holding 15 filled spheres pushed my control farther than the laboratory tests. The hidden voice named my safe control limit as 15 shells or 20 charged fragments. My mana reserve had grown from 20 units to 26. The final change was the loudest. By evening, every public board placed my name above 181 students. The nickname Walking Stove vanished. Someone replaced it with Fire Jailer. I preferred the first one. It sounded employable. Mavis offered me the attic above her kitchen for 8 silver each week. The room had a narrow bed, a round window, and a roof that did not belong to the Academy. I paid the first week at once. Leah helped me carry my blanket. Rel carried the measuring case and refused another copper because he wanted to tell people he had joined my research team. We let him tell them. That night, Mavis fried slices of pork until the edges turned brown. She covered them with onions cooked in butter and served them beside crushed potatoes. The potatoes were soft, salty, and full of cream. Leah brought a jar of sour red berries. Their sharp taste cut through the rich meat. We ate at a small table under the sloped attic roof. Rain tapped the tiles. For the first time since arriving in this world, I had a room that nobody could remove by changing a number on a board. Leah leaned back in her chair. Dax will not stop. No. Are you worried? Yes. She waited. He wasted 60 units because a clerk lost an argument about soup, I said. That is too much emotion near open flame. Leah laughed and reached for another piece of pork. A hard knock came from below. Rel climbed the attic stairs carrying a black envelope. 6 students followed him. More waited in the street. The academy seal covered the envelope. The Dax family flamebird was pressed into the wax beside it. I opened the notice while everyone watched. It accused me of stealing the hereditary flamebird technique, selling stolen elemental property, and attacking Dax with his own family magic. A public disciplinary hearing had been set for sunrise. If found guilty, I would lose my class, my earnings, and my place at the academy. At the bottom, Headmaster Corin had already signed the judgment. The hearing had not begun, but the verdict was waiting for me. At sunrise, the evidence crystal called my fire stolen. The fire trapped inside it answered with Dax's name. Leah and I heard both results in the old laboratory while rain struck the windows. The black envelope had included a sealed crystal taken from the practice court. A thin layer of my mana covered its surface. When Leah placed it against the identity prism, silver letters formed my name. Nolan. That was the evidence Headmaster Corin planned to use. Leah scraped away the outer layer with a copper needle. Orange light remained in the crystal. She tested it again. The prism formed a second name, Dax. The shell carries your signature, she said. The spell inside keeps his. I held one of the charged fragments left from the public challenge. It looked like a curved orange fingernail. My mana controlled its motion, but the energy still belonged to Dax. That was the third consequence of the bubble's rule. Captured magic changed location and owner of control, but it did not change its origin. My class did not steal spells. It preserved evidence. How many fragments do we have? I asked. 11 from Dax's attack and 3 from Merrick's training flare. Enough. Leah packed the prism. I packed the fragments in a wooden tray lined with wool. Mavis packed breakfast because she trusted neither justice nor empty stomachs. She gave us hot egg pies with crisp edges. Steam escaped when I broke mine. The filling held egg, green onion, soft cheese, and small pieces of smoked pork. I ate while walking toward the central hall. 600 people waited outside. The disciplinary hearing had become the most popular event in the academy. Students filled the steps. Workshop masters stood beside cooks and bathhouse workers who wanted my storage service. Teachers occupied the front rows. The public ranking board had been moved inside so every change would be visible. Headmaster Corin sat above the hall on a black wooden platform. He was a broad man with iron-gray hair and a blue formal coat. A golden image of the academy dome hung behind him. Merrick stood at his right. Dax stood at his left in a plain uniform without metal clasps. Corin struck a bell. "This academy depends on rules," he said. "Hereditary magic cannot be copied, sold, or turned against its lawful owner." The Dax family paid for 2 residence halls and half the tournament prizes. Corin was protecting that money by feeding 1 student into the furnace. "Nolan," Corin said, "you returned 60 units of the Flamebird art against Dax. Do you deny it?" "I deny creating or copying his spell. The evidence crystal carries your signature. Only on the container." Corin's gaze moved to the case in Leah's hands. "Unauthorized evidence will not be admitted." Leah stepped forward. "The Academy Review Code requires an identity test on every magical layer." Merrick spoke before Corin could answer. "You lost the right to advise this hearing when you helped Nolan develop an illegal copy." "My laboratory access was restored in front of 42 witnesses," Leah said, "temporarily." Merrick lifted his wand under the edge of his coat. I saw the small gray spell leave it. It moved toward Leah's throat, a silencing charm, weak, almost invisible, and very useful when a witness knew the rules. I created a bubble in its path. The charm vanished inside. The clear sphere turned gray and began whispering with Merrick's voice. 600 people heard it. Merrick hid his wand. I guided the sphere to the identity prism on Corin's table. The prism formed his name in silver light. "Unauthorized evidence," I said. The hall exploded with noise. Students stood on seats. Teachers leaned away from Merrick. The public scribes copied the prism result onto the notice board before Korin could order them to stop. Korin struck the bell 3 times. Silence. The gray charm floated beside his head and continued whispering. He looked at it, then at Merrick. "Lower your wand," he said. Merrick obeyed. That was the first public defeat of the morning. It was also the simplest. Merrick had tried to remove Leah's voice and had given his own magic a glass mouth. Korin could no longer reject our prism without protecting an attack witnessed by the entire hall. A neutral examiner named Yuna came forward. She wore the plain green coat of the city registry and had no academy badge. She tested the sealed evidence crystal, the outer layer named me, the inner fire and all 11 orange fragments named Dax. My signature existed only along the curved edges where the bubbles had held them. "The structure is not copied," Yuna said. "It is the original spell, divided into stored portions. Nolan controlled the containers. Dax created all 60 units. Korin turned to Dax. "Did you give Nolan permission to hold the spell?" Dax's jaw tightened. "I attacked him under a recorded public agreement." "Did he force you to cast?" "No." "Did he copy your family art before the agreement?" Dax looked toward Merrick. The teacher gave him a tiny nod. "I do not know," Dax said. "I placed the 11 fragments around the identity prism. A spell signature contains its casting time and direction. The court can compare them to the practice pillars." Yuna checked the records. Each fragment matched the exact moment Dax's 60-unit fireball crossed the circle. None existed before his attack. The accusations of copying and theft collapsed together. The hall began to chant one word: fraud. Merrick's face hardened. The practice test itself was illegal. Nolan used Dax's magic as a weapon. "He heated my coat," Dax said. Everyone turned toward him. For the first time, uncertainty crossed Merrick's face. Dax stared at the floor. "He could have burned me. He did not. The hidden cooling charms were mine." Laughter and applause struck the platform like a physical wave. Dax had admitted cheating, but he had also refused to repeat Merrick's lie. His reason was not kindness. If the tribunal proved his family magic had been stolen, the city registry could freeze every Flamebird license during the investigation. His family's entire business would stop. He chose the truth that cost him less. It was still truth. Yuna requested Dax's equipment inspection record. Merrick had signed it 1 hour before the challenge. The record claimed the white coat contained no charms. The charm fragments from the court were placed on the prism. Merrick's inspection seal covered everyone. The audience stopped chanting. They did something worse. They laughed. Merrick's lies now stood on the central board under his own signature. Korin ordered him to surrender his teacher's badge. Merrick gripped it. "You approved the judgment." Korin's expression did not change. "I approved a hearing based on your report." "You signed the verdict." The crowd made a low sound. Korin struck the bell, but the sound could not pull the words back. Merrick removed his badge. His red coat no longer looked powerful. It looked like a curtain after the building behind it had fallen. He walked down from the platform between rows of students. Nobody opened a path until he asked. My first enemy had been defeated in the same hall where he expected to erase me. Hundreds saw it. By noon, thousands would hear it. Korin waited until the doors closed. "The theft charge is dismissed," he said. "However, the question of combat certification remains." Leah went still. Korin's eyes settled on my bubbles. A defensive class that fails against a thrown stone may create fatal confidence. The Academy cannot rank Nolan above trained fighters without a complete physical trial. That motive was real. If a city guard trusted my sphere like a steel shield, the first arrow would kill him. Korin did not need to invent the weakness. He only needed to choose the worst possible test for it. The rear doors opened, and an iron training walker entered the hall. It stood twice as tall as a man. 6 metal arms surrounded a round chest. Each fist weighed more than I did. Blue force runes shone at the shoulders, elbows, and knees. The machine had been built to test stone walls. "Survive 1 minute," Korin said. "No weapons, no help. If you succeed, your class will receive full certification and compensation. If you fail, your rank returns to 300th. And if I refuse? The same result. The verdict was waiting again. It had merely changed shape. Leah came close while attendants drew the safety line. Its punches are physical. The bubbles will do nothing. The punches are physical, I said. The machine is not. I watched the blue runes. Each arm moved when a force pulse crossed from the central core into the shoulder ring. Magic created motion. Steel delivered it. The difference was narrow enough to save my life. My reserve held 26 units. I made 12 empty bubbles. That left 14 units for mistakes. Corin raised his hand. The walker charged. Its first fist struck the bubble in front of my chest. The shell burst. The steel continued without slowing. I dropped flat. The fist passed over my head and smashed a section of the safety wall. Stone fragments hit the first row's barrier. Nobody laughed now. The second arm swept low. I jumped. The third clipped my shoulder and threw me into the sand. The time pillar marked 9 seconds. I had learned the price of being correct but slow. I sent 3 bubbles toward the walker's right shoulder. The first touched the outer iron plate and popped. The second entered the open ring between the shoulder and chest. A blue force pulse crossed its surface. The sphere filled with 4 units of motion magic. The shoulder stopped. The arm's physical weight carried it forward, but without the next pulse, it could not correct. The fist struck the floor. I caught another pulse at the left knee, then one at the lower right elbow. Each bubble stole 4 units at the moment the machine needed them. Corin touched the control crystal on his table. The walker accelerated. Its core output rose from 48 units to 72. The force runes burned white. 3 arms moved at once. I ran between its legs. A metal foot struck my 4th bubble. The shell burst before it could fill. The heel hit the ground close enough to throw me forward. My mouth filled with sand. The time pillar marked 27 seconds. I placed 2 bubbles inside the knee ring. The first caught 4 units. The second caught 4 more. The leg locked while the body continued moving. The walker fell. 6 fists hit the court. 4 bubbles burst under the impact. 2 were already full of force magic. Their charged fragments scattered across the iron arms. They remained under my control. I felt 8 blue shards like hooks in my mind. The machine began to rise. I released the stored force through the fragments in the opposite direction. Its own right arms pushed left. Its left knee pushed backward. The walker turned in a slow, helpless circle. Corin moved the control crystal again. I caught the command spell in my final empty bubble. The machine froze facing the platform. The time pillar marked 44 seconds. I had 16 seconds left and no empty bubbles. My shoulder barely moved. The walker still held enough physical momentum to kill me if the command reached it. Corin sent a second command. I overloaded the last sphere on purpose. At 5 units, it broke into silver fragments. I spread them across the command line. Each new pulse entered a different shard and stayed there. The walker did not move. 50 seconds. The audience counted together. 53, 56. Corin pushed both hands against the control crystal. 12 units of command magic rushed toward the machine. I turned the charged silver fragments. The command flowed back. It struck the platform's lifting runes. Corin's grand wooden chair rose into the air. The headmaster gripped both arms as the chair floated above the Golden Academy crest. His blue coat hung below him. For 6 long seconds, the most powerful man in the academy sat near the ceiling while his own trial machine remained on its knees. The time pillar rang. 1 minute. I released the control spell. Corin's chair descended slowly and landed sideways. He stepped out with all the dignity available to a man whose furniture had just defeated him. The audience became a storm. 600 witnesses shouted my name, and the kitchen workers struck pans together. The ranking board rang 3 times. My combat certification changed from provisional to complete. My rank rose from 119th to 31st. My defensive score passed 80. The hidden voice returned. It said I had controlled foreign magic through a moving field and met the requirement for spherical night. No new law entered my mind. The bubble still did one thing. It caught foreign magic. My control simply became wider and steadier. I could now hold 30 shells in linked groups instead of balancing each one alone. My mana reserve expanded from 26 units to 42. The ache behind my eyes eased, but the pain in my shoulder did not. Power always sent the bill somewhere. Yuna read the final ruling. Merrick was suspended and referred to the city registry. The academy cleared every charge against me. Corin had to apologize in public and pay 3 gold for the false judgment, the dangerous test, and my injured shoulder. He stood before the same 600 people. Nolan's class was tested unfairly, he said. His certification is valid. It was not a beautiful apology. It was recorded, witnessed, and expensive. That made it useful. Dax left through a side door. Students did not cheer him. They did not bow either. For the first time, he crossed the academy as an ordinary person. By afternoon, the city news board carried sketches of Corin's flying chair. New storage orders covered our laboratory door. My money increased from 1 gold and 42 silver to 4 gold and 42 silver. The academy also granted Leah and me a research charter for the abandoned storage laboratory. We could accept contracts, buy materials at faculty prices, and keep half the profit from any licensed design. Strength, resources, status. All 3 moved again. Leah made me sit while she wrapped my shoulder. Her hands were careful and her mouth was not. You could have been killed. The machine missed. It hit you. Then it mostly missed. She tied the bandage tighter than necessary. That evening, we cleaned our new laboratory. Rel swept sand from the floor. Mavis brought a chicken pie large enough to require both hands. The crust was golden and flaky. Thick sauce held pieces of chicken, mushrooms, carrots, and sweet green peas. Leah cut the pie while I heated tea with 1 stored flame sphere. Rain stopped outside. Warm light filled the dusty room. My blanket now covered a real cot in the corner. Leah placed her measuring case on a shelf and wrote our names on the laboratory door. For a quiet hour, the academy felt less like an enemy and more like a place we might build something. Then every guard bell began to ring. A black carriage passed through the academy's closed iron gate without breaking it. The bars moved through the carriage like smoke. It stopped outside our laboratory. A thin man stepped down in a black uniform. A silver seal on his chest marked him as a Capitol inspector. Students gathered at once. Corin arrived with his coat unfastened and his face pale. The inspector looked at the new names on our door. "Nolan," he said. "My name is Hale. By order of the Council of Shields, your class and every construct it creates are now property of the Capitol." By dawn, Hale's silver seal had made every bubble in my laboratory pull toward him like iron filings toward a blade. The order was not only paper, it was a spell trying to place a collar around my magic. I kept the bubbles inside a copper cabinet. Hale had taken Corin's office, frozen our research account, and ordered me to compete in the tournament final before the Capitol claimed my class. If I refused, Hale would seal my mana. If I lost, he would seal my mana for instability. If I won, he would take the class because it was valuable. Leah placed a small empty sphere near the cabinet wall. It leaned toward Hale's office, but no visible spell entered it. "The order is using your own signature against you," she said. "The pull exists inside every construct you make. Can we remove it? Not without the original seal. Then we will borrow the seal." Rel arrived with the tournament bracket. His face was pale. My final opponent was Dax. That part was expected. The note written below his name was not. The Capitol had authorized him to connect with the Academy's main fire reservoir. His permitted output was 400 units. "His normal reserve is 60, Leah said. "The reservoir feeds the emergency dome. Nobody uses it for a student match. Hale wants a large demonstration. A 400-unit flame will cross the stands if you miss. Then missing is removed from the plan." We had 6 hours. My small spheres held 4 units each. To stop the largest legal attack, I needed 100. My mana reserve was 42. Even if I emptied myself, I could not create half the number. My money solved part of that problem. The Academy dispensary sold blue recovery tonic for 30 silver per bottle. Each restored 12 mana, while more than 3 caused shaking, nausea, and damaged vision. I bought 8. The bottles and copper anchors cost 3 gold. I had 1 gold and 42 silver left. Money was a stored choice. Today, I needed 100 clear choices between the audience and a firestorm. Leah and I began in the lower laboratory. I created the first sphere, then the second. When their surfaces touched, they did not merge. A flat, clear wall formed between them. Leah sent 6 units of heat into the first. It caught 4. The remaining 2 crossed the shared wall and entered the second sphere. Neither burst. We added a third, then 10. Magic entering any part of the linked group moved through the shared boundaries until each sphere carried an equal load. 10 bubbles safely divided 40 units without my attention moving from one to the next. That was the fourth consequence of the same simple rule. Touching containers could share an incoming spell. Many weak spheres could behave like one wide shell. A dome, Leah said. The hidden class name returned to me. Lord of Domes. I had not earned that stage yet, but I finally understood what it meant. We anchored the spheres to copper silk. The frame held their positions while I controlled their openings and stored energy. 4 curved sections of 25 spheres divided the strain. It was not elegant. It was a bridge made of cups. It could still hold a flood. The first tonic tasted like mint mixed with a metal fence. By the fourth, my fingers shook and every copper wire looked green. Mavis entered the laboratory at that exact moment, carrying a tray of food. She looked at the floor, looked at me, and placed the tray on the opposite table. "Eat before you continue," she said. "We have 3 hours. Then chew quickly." She had fried chicken pieces in a dark honey glaze. The skin was crisp. The meat beneath it stayed soft and hot. Thick noodles carried garlic, pepper, and the rich sauce from the pan. A bowl of sliced cucumbers with salt and vinegar cooled my mouth after each bite. Leah sat beside me on the floor. Her hair had escaped its tie. Copper dust marked one cheek. "You spent most of your money," she said. "I plan to win more. And if the prize is also confiscated, then I will put Hale in a kitchen and rent him as a fire crystal." Mavis nodded. "I will pay 1 silver each morning." We laughed. For 10 minutes the laboratory was warm, the food was good, and the capital could wait outside. Then we returned to work. After the 7th tonic, I could no longer see the color red. Leah hid the 8th bottle. "We have 96 bubbles," she said. "Their capacity is 384 units. Dax's authorized limit is 400. 4 more. Your reserve is empty. The 8th bottle. No. Leah. Your pulse is already too fast." She stood between me and the shelf. For a second, neither of us moved. Then Rel ran into the room. He carried 4 clear spheres in a padded basket. "The kitchen order," he said. "You filled them yesterday." Mavis had not used them. Each sphere still contained 1 unit of low flame. I could not empty the foreign heat without wasting it, so I guided all 4 to the furnace and released the stored energy beneath Mavis's soup pot. The shells remained after release. 100. The complete frame rose from the floor. 100 bubbles formed 4 curved sections around an empty center. Their combined safe capacity was exactly 400 units. Leah returned the 8th tonic. I drank half. Its 6 restored units became 6 reserve bubbles, which I hid behind the frame. My knees almost failed. Leah caught my arm. "You do not need to prove anything to Hale," she said. "I am not doing this for Hale." Outside the laboratory, thousands of spectators were entering an arena where one man planned to release city defense fire. Students who had laughed at me were still students. Cooks who bought my heat were still behind the stands. None of them had signed Hale's order. Leah looked at me for a long moment. "That is why I signed your first report," she said. She saw the answer before the crowd did. She always had. We carried the folded copper frame through the academy. The arena held 8,000 people. More watched through broadcast crystals in city squares. Children wore round hats, and one group carried an inflated white coat on a pole. Dax waited in the center. He looked tired. No gems decorated his plain red uniform. A thick metal cable connected the back of his belt to the fire reservoir beneath the arena. Hale sat in Corin's chair above the court. Corin stood beside him. When I entered, the ranking board announced 31st place. The crowd answered with my name. Hale raised the silver seal. Every sphere on my copper frame pulled toward him. The structure bent. Leah tightened the anchors. I pushed my control through the 4 sections and held them in place. Hale smiled for the first time. The state already recognizes its property. His voice traveled through the broadcast crystals. So did the crowd's answer. They booed him. Hale's smile disappeared. The judge read the rules, including the normal ban on drawing more than 100 units from an external reservoir. Then she read Hale's exception. The noise in the stands changed. People understood. This was not a final match. It was a test performed on a crowded arena. Dax looked up at Hale. "My family contract will be renewed after this?" Hale touched the silver seal. "If you demonstrate that licensed fire remains superior to an unregistered class." There was his chain. Dax's family business had suffered after 1 day of bubble storage. The capital controlled their license. If Dax refused, hundreds of workers could lose their jobs, and his father would lose the company. He had chosen pride before. Now fear had joined it. The judge lowered her hand. Dax attacked at once. A fire lance of 48 units crossed the court. 12 spheres filled, and the lance vanished 2 paces from my chest. I closed the section and sent the stored fire into 12 stone targets along Dax's side. All 12 broke. The crowd roared. My tournament score climbed above Dax's. He formed 2 flame birds of 60 units each. 30 spheres caught them high and low. I released their fire upward. It formed 2 harmless wings above the arena. Children in the stands screamed with delight. Dax's face tightened. He had spent his own mana. I had spent none. My spheres were prepared hours earlier and still existed after release. He could not win with normal attacks. Hale touched the seal. The cable on Dax's back locked into the fire reservoir. Dax looked over his shoulder. "That is enough." "Your contract," Hale said. The words were quiet, but the broadcast crystal caught them. Dax closed his eyes. When he opened them, the reservoir erupted. Fire climbed around him in a red column. The measuring pillars passed 100 units, then 200. The safety barrier around the first rows began to bend. At 300, people tried to leave. The exits closed under Hale's silver seal. Corin grabbed the inspector's arm. A Capitol guard pushed him away. The pillars reached 376 units. Dax raised both hands. The fire spread above him, wide enough to cover half the arena. "Run!" he shouted at me. Then the forbidden firestorm fell. I released the copper anchors. 100 bubbles opened around me. The 4 curved sections expanded and joined. Flat shared walls flashed between them. A giant transparent dome formed over the entire court. The first wave of fire struck. Every sphere turned orange. Heat swallowed the arena. I felt the load pass through the network. 4 units entered the first shells. Excess fire crossed the shared walls. It moved around the curve, dividing itself through the linked containers. 100 units, 200, 300. My vision narrowed. The tonic in my stomach burned. I tasted blood. The north section carried too much. 1 bubble reached 5 units and burst. Charged fragments spread across the frame. I held them in place and opened new paths to the empty shells in the west. Another bubble broke, then a third. The crowd could see nothing but fire inside clear walls. Leah stood at the anchor control beside the court. She moved the copper lines as I directed. Rel held the shaking west frame with both hands. Mavis poured water over a burning support. The measuring pillars reached 376, then stopped. The last tongue of firestorm entered the final sphere. No flame reached the stands. The arena became dark. 100 orange containers formed a glowing dome over me. 3 had broken, but their charged pieces remained part of the network. The total capacity had been 400. 24 units of empty space remained. Dax fell to one knee. 8,000 people stared. The city broadcast crystals showed the same image in every square. I raised one hand. The dome rose. I opened the shells toward the 100 tournament targets placed around the upper wall. Controlled streams of fire left in sequence. The first 10 targets broke, then 20, then 50. The audience began counting. 70, 90, 100. The remaining fire flowed into the empty sky and formed a red ring above the academy. Not one spark touched Dax. He looked up at me through smoke. "I surrender," he said. The judge repeated it. The tournament board announced my victory. For several seconds, the arena made no sound. Then 8,000 voices hit me at once. My name rolled through the stone seats and out into the city. The sealed exits shook under the crowd's feet. The ranking board erased 31st place and wrote first. Dax pulled the reservoir cable from his uniform. He held up the burned connector so every broadcast crystal could see it. "Hale forced the link," he said. He closed the exits. He threatened the fire charter. Corin stepped into the court. I witnessed it. Yuna, the city examiner, raised a recording prism from the judge's table. So did the registry. Hale stood. "National Defense Authority exceeds Academy law," he said. The demonstration succeeded. Nolan and his class will now be transferred. He pointed the silver seal at me. A command spell crossed the arena. It carried 20 units of binding magic and one clear order. Property must kneel. 6 fresh bubbles rose from behind my copper frame. I had saved them outside the dome. The command entered 5. 4 units filled each shell. The 6th remained empty. The spell stopped. Hale's silver seal cracked. The pull inside every bubble vanished. I moved the 5 filled spheres around him. "Do you know what is useful about official magic?" I asked. Hale tried to step back. "You are resisting the Council of Shields. It labels its owner." I opened the bubbles toward the seal in his hand. His own command returned along its magical signature. Silver bands wrapped around his arms and legs. A bright line appeared across his black uniform. Property of the Council. The binding spell lifted him 1 pace above Corin's chair and held him there with his knees bent. The entire arena saw the Capitol Inspector kneeling in the air to his own broken seal. Mavis was the first to laugh. The sound spread through 8,000 people. It reached the city squares through every broadcast crystal. Hale's face remained cold, but his ears became red. The Capitol guards looked at the crowd, the registry prism, and the 100 glowing targets. Neither moved. Yuna revoked Hale's local authority pending investigation. Corin opened the exits. Dax's family charter was placed under city protection, so Hale could not use it as punishment. The hidden voice spoke through the fading roar. I had joined 100 containers into a field, caught a spell meant for thousands, and reached Lord of Domes. Again, the law of my class did not change. Foreign magic entered. My bubbles held it. My mana reserve rose from 42 units to 60. My linked control reached 100 stable spheres. The class reduced the strain of a complete dome, but it did not strengthen one shell against a pebble. The price also remained. My hands shook. Red returned to my vision in painful flashes. I could not create another bubble without rest. The tournament paid 50 gold. After my expenses, I owned 51 gold and 42 silver. The city registry recognized our laboratory as the first licensed spherical defense workshop. The Academy Board placed me first out of 300. Strength, resources, status. All 3 had crossed lines that seemed impossible 3 days earlier. That evening, Leah and I sat on the laboratory roof with bowls of fried rice. Mavis had mixed it with egg, green onion, roasted chicken, and small sweet peppers. A thin honey cake waited between us. Below, students still celebrated around the arena. Leah touched my shaking hand and held it still. "First place," she said. "The attic room is still better." 51 gold. The egg pies were better. She leaned her shoulder against mine. We watched the Academy Dome shine under the stars. For one quiet minute, victory felt warm and ordinary. Then, every empty bubble in the laboratory rose through the open windows. They formed a vast curve above the roof. The Academy Dome answered with a sound deeper than thunder. Light spread beyond its edge, over the city walls and across the whole sky. For the first time, everyone saw the true barrier. Our entire city stood inside a transparent sphere. Something moved among the stars outside it. A hand larger than the Academy pressed against the sky. One enormous finger tapped the sphere. The barrier cracked. The hand outside the sky had no skin. It was made of dark plates, and cold white light moved through the gaps like blood. Its finger tapped again. The whole city jumped. Roof tiles slid into streets. Every window in the academy shook. The honey cake rolled off the laboratory roof and vanished over the edge. I considered that a declaration of war. My empty bubbles rose toward the crack. I ordered them to catch the force. The finger struck a third time. Every sphere in its path burst. Nothing slowed the blow. The crack crossed another section of sky. The attack was physical. It had no spell for me to capture, no foreign mana crossing a surface. My class could imprison a firestorm, but the thing outside was knocking on our city like a customer who had forgotten patience. The difference was now visible to everyone. People in the streets screamed. Some ran toward the academy. Others ran away from it. Neither direction offered much advantage inside a sphere. The city guard commander Soren climbed onto the arena platform and activated every broadcast crystal. His voice reached the squares. Move away from glass. Enter stone shelters. All licensed mages report to the barrier towers. Then he looked at me. Can you catch it? No. He did not waste time asking again. Then tell me what you can catch. That was the correct question. Leah and I ran down from the roof. My legs still felt weak from the tonics. My mana reserve held only 7 units. The giant tournament dome had collapsed into 97 intact shells, 3 groups of empty fragments, and a bent copper frame. We moved the intact bubbles above the arena. They did not lean toward the hand. They leaned downward. All 97 pointed beneath Hale's chair. Something inside the city is pulling them, Leah said. The finger struck again. A section of the true barrier flashed. For one instant, silver lines appeared under every street. They curved below the ground and met beneath the academy. We had lived on the inner surface of a giant magical lock. The academy dome was only its visible control point. Corin ordered guards to bring Hale from the holding room. The room was empty. 1 steel pin lay on the floor beside 6 popped bubbles. Hale had used a physical object to break his own binding shells. He had listened during every trial. He knew exactly where my class failed. Yuna checked the registry prism. His capital seal is moving below the arena. Soren opened the old shield stairs. Stone doors beneath the judge's platform separated for the first time in decades. Before we descended, Mavis caught me by the sleeve. She pushed a cup of hot broth into my hands. It was clear and salty, with egg ribbons, green onion, and small pieces of chicken. I drank it in 6 breaths. She gave me bread filled with melted cheese and wrapped 2 more pieces for Leah. Saving the city without breakfast is bad management, she said. My reserve rose to 10 units. 3 bubbles, I told Leah. She understood. I created 3 replacements. We now had 100 intact spheres again. Their safe capacity was 400 units. Soren left most guards at the towers. Corin, Dax, Yuna, Leah, and I entered the stairs with him. Rel carried the copper anchor spool. Yuna kept her broadcast prism active. Everything we saw traveled to the city squares. The stairs ended in a chamber larger than the tournament arena. A curved, transparent wall formed its floor. Far below it, the lower half of the city sphere disappeared into darkness. 12 silver channels met around a black control pillar. Hale stood beside it. His broken seal had been fitted into a narrow opening. Silver light climbed the pillar and spread into the channels. A measuring ring marked 100 units, then 200. "Stop the key," Corin said. Dax fired a flame bird at the pillar. Hale raised an iron plate. The physical shield scattered the spell into the wall. "One more attack and you damage the lock." Dax lowered his hands. Hale looked at me. "You were meant to join the opening field after the tournament. Your dome woke the old structure sooner than expected. You brought the thing outside. It was already coming." The measuring ring reached 240 units. The giant hand struck again. Dust fell through the chamber. A new crack appeared in the curved floor beneath us. Hale did not smile. He did not look proud. He looked tired. "There are 12 sphere cities," he said. "The knocker finds one during each cycle. If no sphere opens, it tests them all until the weakest breaks. The council opens one city as a decoy and saves the other 11. Yuna's prism sent every word above ground. "You chose this city," Leah said. "The council chose it 40 years ago. I was born in the previous decoy, Sphere 8. My family died because its inspector refused the order. The knocker broke the shell and then struck 2 more cities before it left. His motive was not money or pride. It was arithmetic carved into grief. 1 city against 3, thousands against millions. He had accepted that someone must become the smaller number. He had simply made sure he would never be inside it again. The opening key reached 300 units. Soren drew his sword. "Turn it off." "If I do, the council will open another sphere," Hale said. "Perhaps yours next year. Perhaps the capital. This city was selected. Its citizens have already lived 40 borrowed years." His voice echoed through every square. People who had been running stopped to listen. Mavis stood outside the arena with her bread paddle. Rel's friends crowded around a broadcast crystal. Academy students filled the shelters. The same city Hale had reduced to 1 number heard him explain the calculation. Then the public boards answered. Messages appeared across them faster than the scribes could approve. "We are not a number. Close the sphere. Fight all 12. The final message spread to every board. "Nolan, catch the key." Hale saw it through Yuna's broadcast image. For the first time, his calm broke. "They do not understand the cost." "People dislike being spent without permission," I said. The ring reached 360 units. I opened the copper frame. 100 bubbles spread across the 12 silver channels. Leah directed them into groups. 8 spheres covered each of 11 channels. 12 covered the final channel. Hale pulled the steel pin from his sleeve and threw it. The pin crossed the chamber toward the nearest bubble. Leah struck it with her measuring case. Metal rang against wood. The pin fell through the transparent floor's safety grid and vanished into darkness. Hale stared at her. "Researchers repeat important experiments," she said. Soren and Corin moved toward Hale. He pressed his hand against the control pillar. A physical barrier dropped between us. Thick iron bars locked around the pillar. We could see him, but no one could reach him before the key completed. The ring marked 380 units. My bubbles touched the channels. The opening spell entered them. Silver light filled the first group. 4 units settled into each shell. Excess power moved through the shared walls and into the next group. The control pillar screamed. Hale pushed harder. 390 units. My head filled with pressure. The city sphere was trying to use my network as part of its lock. For one breath, I felt every curve beneath every street. Houses, towers, tunnels, and rivers existed inside one shell. 400 units entered. All 100 bubbles filled to their safe limit. The opening key stopped. No empty space remained. If 1 more unit crossed, the first bubble would burst and the failure would travel around the network. Hale knew it. He removed a small reserve crystal from his coat. 5 units, Leah said. Enough to break the chain. Dax aimed through the iron bars. He could not strike Hale without risking the pillar. Soren's sword could not reach. Corin pulled at the barrier control. Hale crushed the reserve crystal. 5 units of silver magic entered the final channel. I separated 5 bubbles from the network. The first extra unit struck 1 sphere alone. Its load reached 5. It burst. 5 charged fragments formed. The remaining extra magic moved toward the gap. I placed the second full bubble behind it. That sphere burst too. Then the third. Each breaking shell bought a fraction of a second. The charged fragments stayed under my control, still holding their original 4 units. I spread them across the gap like pieces of a shattered door. The 4th bubble broke. The 5th followed. Pain crossed my eyes. The chamber vanished into white light. I could no longer see. "Nolan!" Leah called. "The inward channels are below the outward ones. Turn the fragments toward my voice." I did not need sight to feel my own containers. I turned every charged fragment inward. The giant lock had 2 directions. Power flowing toward the outer shell opened it. Power flowing back toward the central pillar closed it. The 95 intact shells held 380 units. The fragments held 25. I released 400 units toward the lock and kept the last 5 inside the fragments. Silver fire raced down the inward channels. The iron bars around Hale became transparent. The control pillar reversed. His broken seal flew out of its slot and struck his chest. The word property appeared across his uniform again. Above us, the city watched a silver wave run through every street. The cracks in the sky stopped growing. The hand struck. This time, the closed sphere carried the physical force around its entire curve. Towers bent but did not fall. Windows broke. The barrier held. I released the last 5 units into the inward channels. The cracks began to close. One vanished above the market. Another sealed over the academy. The longest crack remained beneath the giant finger. City mages poured power into the 12 barrier towers. Dax connected his family reservoir without Hale's cable and sent 60 controlled units into the nearest channel. Corin added 40. Leah guided the flow through the copper anchors. Across the city, ordinary students added sparks, cleaning charms, lights, and drops of healing magic. Each spell was small. Together, they made the sphere shine. The last crack closed. The finger slid across the smooth barrier. For the first time, the thing outside moved its enormous head near the sky. White light opened where a face should have been. It looked directly at me. Then the knocker withdrew its hand. The dark shape moved away from our sphere and disappeared among the stars. Silence covered the city. The public boards changed together, sphere sealed. Nobody had written the words. The ancient lock itself had spoken. Then bells began. One tower rang, then 12. Every kitchen pan, workshop hammer, and academy bell joined them. People left the shelters and filled the streets. They could see me through Yuna's broadcast prism, blind on one knee beneath the academy. They shouted my name anyway. Hale stood inside the failed control bars with his own seal fixed to his chest. Soren removed it and placed iron restraints around his wrists. "The council will replace me," Hale said. "Then the next inspector can explain the arithmetic in public," Yuna replied. She read the charges into the broadcast prism. Attempted destruction of a protected city, abuse of national authority, unlawful use of the academy reservoir. Conspiracy to conceal the 12 spheres. Hale's defeat was not hidden below ground. Every citizen witnessed it. Every board recorded it. The council could deny one man. It could not erase an entire city that had heard him confess. The hidden voice reached me one final time. I had controlled a complete sphere field for one breath. My mana reserve rose from 60 units to 72. My stable linked limit increased from 100 shells to 120. No second cheat appeared. A stone could still pop one bubble. A sword could still kill me. I had survived because other people held the physical line while I caught the magic. That was not weakness. That was a team. My sight returned slowly. The first thing I saw was Leah's face close to mine. "How many fingers?" she asked. "On the hand outside or yours?" "Mine." "You are holding up none." She lowered her closed fist. "Good." Then she hugged me hard enough to test my injured shoulder again. By noon, the city registry suspended every secret order from the Council of Shields. The 11 other sphere cities received copies of Hale's confession through the ancient channels. Some answered. Others remained silent. The Academy removed the old ranking board. Corin said first place no longer measured what I had done. A new board went up over the gate. Nolan, guardian of the city sphere. The words were too large. Mavis said they were still smaller than my food bill. The city paid 100 gold for restoring the barrier. My purse rose from 51 gold and 42 silver to 151 gold and 42 silver. More important, the council granted Leah and me a small stone house beside the academy, with a kitchen below and a round laboratory above. Rel became our first paid assistant at 10 silver each week. Mavis received the city furnace contract. Dax kept his family charter after agreeing to sell heat crystals at a public price. Corin reopened the research wing with tournament profits. Strength, resources, status. All three had moved. This time, the whole city moved with them. At sunset, I sat in the kitchen of my new house. Mavis had left a pot of beef stew on the stove. The sauce was dark and thick. Soft potatoes, carrots, and onions had absorbed the taste of meat and pepper. Fresh rolls waited under a cloth. Leah melted butter over them with one tiny captured flame. We ate beside the round window. Outside, workers repaired roofs. Children chased soap bubbles through the street. None of them laughed when the bubbles rose. Leah placed her laboratory key on the table. "I was the first person to see what your class could do," she said. "You were the first person to test it correctly." That is not what I meant. She looked at me with the same clear gray eyes I had found in the laughing amphitheater. I saw that you did not want Dax burned. I saw that you spent every coin to protect people who mocked you. I stopped staying only for the research after the first night. I put my hand over hers. Good, I said. I bought a house with one laboratory and 2 chairs. It would be wasteful to use only one. That is your confession? I can calculate a longer one. She leaned across the table and kissed me before I could begin. The stew remained hot. The house was ours. For a few quiet minutes, no teacher, rival, inspector, or creature touched the sky. Then a small clear sphere appeared above my palm. 11 distant lights shone inside it. The hidden voice named our home Sphere 9. It said all 12 locks had heard my field and could now speak to one another. 10 lights remained steady. 1 turned red. The final light went dark. Far beyond our sealed city, another sphere had opened.